you to review.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And also to review again, share with your friends, or for those who couldn't be here. We'll have a link to that on the Social Justice Ministry webpage on the St. Andrews website. We'll also have the slides that are shown today on the Social Justice page. And that's going to include a slide full of resources, so you can dig a whole lot deeper if you want to. There will be links to websites of other organizations, study materials. And if you have a resource that you think would be particularly valuable, please send it to us and we'll include it on that list of resources. At the end of the slides will be email addresses for Sue Torfin and myself and Peter and Jim. And so if you have resources you want to include, send those to any of us and we'll make sure that they get on the website. I need to talk a little bit about Zoom. Unlike many sessions that you're probably familiar with on Zoom, we will not be using the chat function or the raise hand function. That's just to sort of minimize distractions that people often feel when they're seeing those things pop up through sessions. We do want to hear your questions and comments, so we ask that you write them down. There will be a time at the end of the session when you'll have to remember to unmute yourself, but you can ask questions. When we go over to the slides, if you want to be sure and see the speaker as they're speaking and showing their slide when we're doing this screen share, you'll need to click on the upper right-hand corner of your screen where it says view, and look for the word speaker. It might say active speaker or side-by-side speaker or some other kind of speaker, but just click on speaker, and then a little box with the person who's talking will appear so that you can see that as you're watching the slides. And so now I think we're ready to go to the agenda slide. Okay, so this is what's going to be going on this morning. We've already ticked one item off, welcome and introductions. We'll be speaking about advocacy and education, how a bill becomes law, the legislative successes that we've had as an advocacy team here at St. Andrews in 2021, effective advocacy strategies, what's coming up in the 2022 session, and next steps, how we might participate. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Sue Torfin and just say thanks again and welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just absolutely delighted that you're all here. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't see myself. I can see Selena now. At the very end, we're going to have an opportunity for any of you to volunteer for things if you have not in the past and think you would like to now. But I wanted to plant that seed so that you think about that as I talk about all the things that the Social Justice Ministry does. I would like you to put my slide 3 up, Jim, if you would. The one before that. I'm missing one then. That's all right. Over the past years, the Social Justice Ministry has been involved in a number of different things, and we've evolved as we've gone along. For many years, we did some things that were primarily aimed at education and kind of consciousness raising about social justice issues. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, Betsy Hoover and I became our representatives to the Interfaith Alliance, which is an interfaith organization that works primarily on advocacy kinds of things. They provide really good training on a regular basis that Betsy and I took advantage of. And we've continued to stay connected with them as representatives of our congregation. One of the things they do besides the ongoing education is they keep track of legislation that they're invested in promoting. And we often work with them on bills that they say are important. Our priorities often match theirs. So when our 3 areas of advocacy match theirs, then we collaborate with them, but we often do some bills that they are not working on either. But they have been a very, very significant resource for us. We've identified as a community 3 areas of focus that we want to pay attention to and work on. We did this through a process of 3 conversations that we invited the congregation to about advocacy, telling people what it was about, why we're engaged for the sake of changing the kinds of systems that promote or sustain injustices or inequalities. So the 3 areas that we've identified for the issues that we want to work on are racial justice, LGBTQ+ rights, and housing rights and homelessness kinds of issues. So those have become very critical for us. During those conversations, we also decided that once we identified these 3 areas, that we could take a stand as a congregation on these issues, not just as individuals, so that when we write a letter to a committee member in Congress, that we can speak for the congregation, that our values support us working on these issues. So we will often say, as a representative of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, if we participate in a march or a protest of some sort, we could carry our St. Andrew's banner so that we are standing for all of us. Jim, would you now go to the slide that says Advocacy Rapid Response? I think it was the one that was up before. No, back up, the one you had 2 slides ago. There you go, that's the one. So I'm going to be talking about a number of things that we do to organize ourselves so that we can effectively engage in advocacy. I'll be talking about some specific advocacy structures that we have, but then we're also going to be talking about our rapid response, our Lectio Divina program on Thursdays, the education that we're doing, including Sacred Ground, and then Betsy's going to speak a little bit about restorative justice. Now, Jim, if you go to the advocacy calls to action one. Thank you very much. So, like I mentioned before, we do a lot of this in collaboration with the Interfaith Alliance. Right now, we have at least 40-some people on a distribution list that, you know, I'm going to ask you to go back to the Zoom screen, Jim, so we're not just looking at slides. Stop sharing your screen. Yeah, thanks. And then you're free to be in gallery view or speaker view. So we have 40-some people on a distribution list, and if you're not on that list and would like to be, that's one of the things you can offer to do as we go through this. And on that distribution list, it's an email list. I do send a variety of kinds of messages. I will forward any messages I get from the Interfaith Alliance. They send messages about all their activities, some of which are advocacy, some of which are not. But we want to support them in any way that we can. I also forward messages from the public policy network of the National Church. They highlight issues that they want us to engage in on social justice issues at a national level. And the messages they send about specific issues will often include a really easy click way of signing on to a message. You can also write your own message, but if you don't have the time, you can just click. It's a very, very simple process so that we can be engaged at a national level as well. I also send messages related to local, not local, state issues, state legislation that's coming up. And I suggest ways to get engaged. And I have a cat that's going to come and entertain me here for a minute. So in those letters or in those messages that I send, could you put up slide 6, Jim, the one that says calls to action, state and national? Next one. There we go. So the calls to action that I send out for state issues are going to invite you to either write a letter, make a phone call, perhaps testify, perhaps participate in a march related to an issue. But when I send a message that asks you to write a letter or send a phone call, those messages are going to include, and you can go to the next slide, Jim. They're always going to include either the text of the bill or a summary of the bill. A sample letter that you could use as is to send, and a list of contact information. Those contacts are the committee members who are hearing testimony on a particular bill. As we go forward, Zoe is going to be talking about how a bill becomes law, and the period during that process that it's possible to influence people is when the committee members that the bill has been assigned to are going to hear testimony. So we want to get letters or phone calls to those committee members, because that's the direct route to being heard. And then if someone chooses to testify, then we arrange to testify to that particular committee. So those messages I send out that are a call for action, try to make it as easy as possible for you to respond. Those of you who have participated, if you have feedback for me that makes that process better or more helpful to you, I really want to hear that. We want to make this as quick and easy as we can so that more people can participate. So always I welcome any kind of feedback that you may have. Anyone who is on that list makes a choice of how much they can do. There's no obligation to respond to every message. Some people have time at one time and not at another. For some people, just forwarding that sample letter on is what they can manage. For some people, if they have a personal story or a connection to somebody on the committee, especially, writing a personal letter really does make a difference. And if you have time to do that, that's wonderful. We also have a rapid response list of people, and these are not exactly the same list. It's only some of the people who have volunteered to be available if something needs to be done in a hurry. And Bill's going to be talking
Sue, I'm prepared to speak about that.
Yes,
on
yes,
the next slide.
Yes. Would you do that, Bill? Go ahead.
Yes. Our rapid response system sends text messages when advocacy is needed on short notice. Examples of that might be last-minute knowledge of a public hearing on a bill before the Colorado House or Senate subcommittee, or an urgent email writing campaign to undecided elected representatives. There's also spur of the moment public. We would also send a text on spur of the moment public advocacy, such as if there's a demonstration at the Capitol we didn't have any advance notice of. For example, a couple summers ago, when Black Lives Matter demonstrations happened spontaneously almost every day, when there isn't time to put it in the fruits or send an email about it. And also any other sudden unexpected happening with short notice, we would send these rapid response text messages. They are only used when there's enough time, when there's not enough time to publicize via email or the fruits. Texts are sent only to the parishioners who sign up to receive them. So if you want to be on this list, let us know. Just because you receive a rapid response text doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. We just don't want you to miss anything, to miss any opportunity. So that's what I have to say about rapid response. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Bill. I would like to go on to introduce Jim Fitz, who is going to talk about our Lectio Divina prayer session that we have on Thursdays. Jim, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, Sue, thank you. Last year at about this time, we had our first Lectio Divina gathering that was sponsored by the Social Justice Ministry. Since then, every Thursday at noon, we've gathered for prayer using the ancient worship practice of Lectio Divina to drive home to ourselves the profound social justice needs of our world, our nation, and our community. It is said that repetition is the language of love, and Lectio Divina is characterized by a whole lot of repetition. Repetition until the heart, not just the head, really hears. The practice of Lectio Divina consists of a selected brief reading, the Lectio, repeated at least 4, or in our practice, 5 times. Following the introductory reading, we're invited to listen for a word, a phrase, or an image that speaks strongly to us. This is followed by a time of briefly sharing that word, phrase, or image. Following the 3rd reading, we are invited to spend time in silent meditation, meditatio, perhaps briefly journaling. And again, a time of sharing is offered. Following the 4th reading, we are invited to ponder and pray, oratio, concerning what God wants to say to us or we to God about what has been given to us in the meditation phase. The final aspect of the practice is silent contemplation, contemplatio, a precious 10-minute period of what Father Thomas Keating called resting in God. For me and for others of our Lectio Divina weekly gathering, this has become an important aspect of our spiritual connectedness and community, and in our growth toward a motivating awareness of social justice issues. We invite you to join us by sending me an email so that I can include you in the weekly distribution of Lectio materials and the Zoom link. And if you have questions, please write them down and we can entertain them at the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to invite Sue Kilgore to talk to us about the Social Justice Ministry's ongoing education programs.
Thanks, Sue. As was mentioned earlier, Social Justice Ministry really kind of started out as a vehicle for educating people in the congregation about social justice issues. And as you can see, we've gone beyond that, but we still do a number of educational initiatives. I think the biggest one for us has been Sacred Ground. This is a program, a 10-week study program put together by the Episcopal Church on race and racism, where we've learned the histories of communities of color in the United States and how American systems and institutions actually perpetuate racism even to now. And then we also examine how we as Christians might respond. We ran the series in the summers of 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic. It was by Zoom. We're hopeful that we might do it again and we might be able to do it in person. In the past, we've had a total of about 50 participants. And so if you're interested in that, let one of us know. And we'll see about running it again. If you'd like more information, there's more on the Social Justice Ministry webpage, including a link to the Episcopal Church's Sacred Ground webpage. So you can take a look at that if you'd like to know more. Another thing, a couple of years ago, we had summer Friday night social justice movies. This, of course, was when we could do it in person with wine and popcorn. And then that kind of went underground. But we started again with a different format on Monday, Martin Luther King Day, where we showed the movie. Well, we asked people to view the movie Selma, and then we gathered on Monday evening for a really rich conversation about the movie for about an hour. And we're looking to do that again on a periodic basis with movies with social justice themes. So watch The Fruits for more information about that, and our website also. Other things we're considering, and if you're interested, again, please, let us know if there are things that you would like to be a part of. Book studies on books dealing with racial and social justice issues. There's another Episcopal Church program called Becoming Beloved Community, which guides churches in an examination of race and racism in their communities and congregations, and then helps those entities discover how they can commit as individuals and churches and larger institutions to racial healing. And once again, if you'd like to know more about that, there's information on the Social Justice webpage, and there's also a link to the Becoming Beloved Community information on the Episcopal Church website. Finally, another thing that we're looking at is engaging in dialogue across differences. And of course, as we all know, this is a really complex, fraught time where people often are just unable to talk to people we disagree with, even family members. It's just really hard. And so there are several programs, including one that was developed by the Episcopal Church to explore ways to engage in loving and constructive conversation with people with whom we disagree, which we believe to be a really, really needed thing in our world right now. So again, watch The Fruits. We'll let you know when those things come along. And so that's what we've got going on education-wise. We'd love to hear from you about things you might be interested in, and visit our website. And thanks. Turn it back to Sue.
Thank you, Sue. And our last bit about filling you in on all the things that the Social Justice Ministry are involved in is going to be Betsy Hoover talking about the fact that we are making some efforts to collaborate with other organizations. So Betsy, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to give a quick overview of a special program that really excites me. It's one that keeps people, especially those of color, out of prison and prevents them from turning into hardened criminals. Restorative justice is a process that provides justice for both victim and offender. Restorative Denver is a partnership between the Denver District Attorney's Office and the Conflict Center. The Conflict Center organizes the community-based alternative to punitive punishment and incarceration, while the DA's office chooses first-time offenders who accept responsibility for their actions. At the end of the process, their records are expunged. If you sign up to participate as a community member in restorative justice conferences, you'll hear the people who've been harmed talk about how their lives have been affected. You'll ask questions and help formulate contracts contracts that offenders agree to follow in order to repair the harm that they've done. And in this process, everyone feels respected, positive relationships develop, and you will play a part in changing the trajectory of lives. A 2-hour training will provide you, a 2-hour training will prepare you to be a community member. You'll gain more skill and reap rewards each time that you participate in one of the 3-hour conferences. You'll be invited to join one approximately 2 times a month. Over time, if you want to participate more and have greater responsibility, you can be trained as a conference facilitator. So it's a really powerful program with, I think, almost minimal requirements as far as time. So it's, to me, it's just a great thing. So if you want to learn more, please go to the links on restorative justice that are on our resource sheet. And please contact me if you'd like to sign up for the Restorative Denver training with the St. Andrews Group, or if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Can you stop sharing screen, please, Jim? Well, I want to thank all of those who just spoke for giving you a broad view of the many ways in which the social justice ministry is operating. You can see we have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm that goes in a lot of directions. So if you have questions about any of that, please feel free to talk to one of us. And again, if there's any part of what we're doing that catches your imagination, we would love to have your participation. Next, the rest of the this morning is going to be focused on advocacy in particular and various aspects of how we can participate in helping to establish laws that honor social justice and equity. Since many of us are not that familiar with how an idea ends up being a signed law in the state of Colorado, I'm going to ask Zoe Cole to talk to us about that process. Zoe has a new job. If you don't know Zoe, she is has recently retired as our child and family minister, but she is now working as a nonpartisan Senate reading clerk. So Zoe can tell you more about that if she chooses, but Zoe, why don't you tell us about how a bill becomes law?
All right, we can go to the share screen, the first of my 3. So you know what we're going to do. We're going to do first, I'm going to give just a broad overview initially with a couple of fast facts, and then I'm going to talk about the legislative process. You probably know the basics, but we'll talk about some of the details and where is the place that is most likely to interact with in terms of advocacy. So we can go back to the whole screen, or we can go to the next slide. So the Colorado General Assembly, as in all states except Nebraska, is a bicameral legislature with a House of Representatives and a Senate. We have 65 members of the House of Representatives who are elected for 2-year terms. They are term limited to 4 terms, and every 2 years, the whole House is up for re-election. The Senate consists of 35 members who are elected for 4-year terms. They are term limited to 2 terms, and half of them are up for election every 2 years. You can serve a total of 16 years, and it is not uncommon to be elected initially to the House of Representatives to serve your full term, eligible term there, and then be elected to the Senate, serve for another 8 years, and then move on to something else. a session, the Colorado Assembly comes into session once a year, although for some reason, a single General Assembly sits for 2 regular sessions. The first session is in odd numbered years, and the second session is in even numbered years. So this year, the session opened on January 12th, and it is the second regular session of the 73rd General Assembly. And that session is limited by law to 120 days. The Colorado General Assembly has about 230 year-round staff and 115 session-only staff. My position is a session-only position. I'm only needed when the Senate is in session. So, and there are a number of other positions like that. Just very, very briefly, the Colorado first Colorado General Assembly convened on November 1st, 1876, after Colorado became the 38th state. It started with 26 senators and 49 members of the House of Representatives. Colorado was the first legislature in the United States to elect women. We elected 3 women to the House in 1894, and we were the second state in the United States to have a female senator. We elected our first one in 1912. So that's that slide. And now we're going to talk about the details of how a bill becomes a law. If you are old enough to have seen Schoolhouse Rock, you may have seen something like this. There are lots of versions. Some are very complex, some are less so. This is a stripped down version. You'll notice that it talks about that it references a pretend bill, SB 22001. That means SB is a Senate bill for bills that whose house of initial action is the House. They are HB, and they would be HB 22-1001 and following. Senate bills are 001 and following. So that's how you know whether you're working with a bill that was introduced in the House or the Senate. There is no difference in our legislature. There are, depending on where you go in the General Convention, which is the Episcopal Church's bicameral legislature, there are some rules about what gets introduced where. And in Congress, there are rules about what gets introduced in the House and what gets introduced in the Senate. In Colorado, there are no rules about that, except for revenue raising bills. Those probably aren't going to be ones you're going to think about in terms of advocacy, but those always get introduced in the House. And then the long bill is the state budget, and it alternates being introduced in the Senate or in the House every other year. So the first thing that happens, briefly, I just want to say, we're talking about advocacy at the state legislature, but Colorado is one of 24 states that in the United States that has an initiative process whereby citizens may petition to have something put on the ballot bypassing the state legislature. And we are one of 23 states that have a referendum process whereby something that the legislature passed can either be addressed by citizens or referred to citizens. So just set that aside for a minute. No, that's a unique feature of some states, and Colorado is one of them. But the legislative process, the way it happens is somebody has an idea, and there's a lot of process before it ever becomes SB 22-001 to make sure it's in the proper form, to see how it interacts with existing laws, to do a fiscal analysis, but eventually it's introduced in the legislature. It's scheduled for a first reading. I'm the one who does that. The bill is read. The title is read. So SB 1 concerning pandemic support. And that's the title. The legislators who have identified themselves as prime sponsors, and that is the first reading. So everything is scheduled. And from an advocacy point of view, the best thing to know is the scheduling piece. And so first a bill is read the first time, and then that's when it's assigned to a committee. So you'll see that in the left-hand corner, you've got the purple square and a green arrow pointing down to a circle. The circle is the point where advocacy primarily interacts. There are other pieces, but your main piece from advocacy perspective is when a bill is in its committee. So it goes to the committee. There may be an opportunity for testimony. There will be discussion by the committee. The committee will eventually make a recommendation and send it back to the House of Initial Action, where it will be scheduled for second reading. It will probably be considered in something called the Committee of the Whole, which is a less formal procedure of discussing and just up or down, and that's where amendments are most likely to happen. They will probably have come from a recommendation at the committee level. Some of that will be the result of advocacy. Some of it will be the result of negotiation between the parties to find something that everybody can agree on, a middle ground. But once it gets, if it gets passed on second reading, it's called engrossed. And these, I've given you these terms because when you see bill text, for example, you get sent a text or an email about a particular bill that you want to do something with. You'll know where the bill is in the process by how it's identified. Once it's been scheduled for once it's gone through second reading in its House of Initial Action, it's been engrossed. And then it will pass out of the Committee of the Whole and be scheduled for a third reading. If it passes on third reading, it will be identified as re-engrossed, and then it will be sent to the other house. So I'm imagining this is a Senate bill because I work in the Senate, but the same thing will happen if it's a House bill. The numbers will just be different. So once it's passed third reading in its House of Initial Action, it's going to go through exactly the same process. There will be a second committee that will hear the bill and a second opportunity for advocacy for a different group of legislators to consider the same positions that you want to advocate. In that other house, when the bill passes on second reading, it's revised. And when it passes third reading, it's re-revised. Assuming a bill passes both houses in exactly the same form, it is enrolled, signed by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, and sent to the governor for his signature. Because of what I told you initially about initiatives and referendums, there's a piece at this stage. It's potentially an advocacy piece because the governor is also someone who can be advocated to not sign a law that has been passed by the legislature. It's also possible once a bill has been passed by the legislature for the people to petition to have it put on the ballot before it becomes law. And that's part of the referendum process. And so you may hear these terms that a bill either has a safety clause, and if it has a safety clause, then it cannot be referred to the ballot. And if it has a referendum clause, that means the legislature has decided to send it to the people to be considered and voted on before it becomes a law. Otherwise, the governor signs it within 10 days if the legislature is in session, and the governor has 30 days to sign it if the legislature is not in session. If the legislature is in session and the governor vetoes a bill, then there is an opportunity for the bill to go back to both houses. And in order to become law, in spite of the governor's veto, 2/3 of the senators and 2/3 of the members of the House of Representatives must repass the bill for it to become law. So that is the basic overview. If you have any questions, I think there will be an opportunity at the end for questions. But that's the system within which you are working to advocate for the positions that you believe are consistent with our social justice values. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. I learned a whole lot.
Good.
I can imagine that there may be lots of questions for Zoe. I would ask a few right now if I had the opportunity, but I'm hoping that you'll all be writing down your questions so that you don't lose them, so that we can address them at the end. So thank you again, Zoe. That was really helpful. I would like to talk briefly about our efforts last year and the successes we had in the bills that we supported. The first one that you see on the slide is the title of the bill was Gender Identity Expression, Anti-Discrimination. I kind of chuckle at some of the titles there. They sound a little bit crazy, but there's some very specific reason why they're titled the way they are. But this bill was primarily an updating of prior laws focusing on anti-discrimination, and that it put greater emphasis on transgender issues. Transgender females are some of the most vulnerable people to exploitation, harassment, and discrimination. So we supported that because we have this commitment to LGBTQ issues. The second bill there, and you can see the numbering that Zoe was referring to. These first two were House bills. The second one there is Record Sealing Collateral Consequences Reduction, another mouthful. This bill was an attempt to give people an opportunity to expunge their records, to clear their records of certain kinds of criminal charges. One of the most, I think, significant parts of the bill is that in the past, people who were arrested but never had any charges filed against them still had that on their record. And it could affect jobs, it could affect housing, it could affect education for the individual, but also those effects carry down to their families. There's something like 60,000 children in Colorado who have had a parent incarcerated. So one of the conditions was that anyone who had been arrested but never charged, that their record could be eliminated, erased. But there were some other things too, many of them related to drug charges. This year, there's going to be a follow-up bill, and in a few minutes after 11 o'clock, Nadine Kirster is going to join us, and she's going to talk to us about a bill that's being submitted this year that aims to make that process automatic for many criminal charges. Right now, people have the right to clear their record, but it can be time-consuming and complicated, and I think maybe costly for some people. The Interfaith Alliance has participated in record sealing clinics that help people with that process, but the next bill is hoping to make that automatic. We worked on the bill that's titled Creation of a Financial Empowerment Office. And the intent of that bill was to grow resilience and well-being, access to safe, affordable financial products, to improve financial management for people. But in particular, what caught our attention is that it aimed to dismantle barriers to ownership and wealth, especially for low income and communities of color, which certainly is aligned with our commitment to racial justice. It also provided some tools for financial stability, like ways to avoid evictions. The last one there, the rights in residential lease agreements, was written primarily to protect the rights of renters from things like evictions that are not warranted, or repeated late fees, pile on top of late fees, problems with habitability of the residents. So it was primarily to help people, to protect them from abuses from the owner of the property. So those are things that we worked on last year. All of them passed. We were delighted that our efforts made a difference. We're going to be talking a little bit soon about other aspects of how to be effective at doing the work that we're aiming to do. But I think right now we'll take about a 5-minute break and come back in 5 minutes, and we'll continue. Thanks for your attention. I know this is a loaded hour. Thanks so much. See you in a few minutes.
Peter, just as a technical question, when you're looking at my screen share, do you also see who is speaking, that whole business over on the right-hand side?
Yeah, and to give as much space as possible, when you click on view in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to get a number of options. And one of them, at least on Windows machines, is a series of icons that show a dash or an underscore, a small rectangle, two rectangles, and then a grid.
Peter, I got all of that. I was just wondering what all you see in my screen share. Are you also seeing the person who's talking, the little window, the speaker?
Well, it depends on what view I have selected, and I have selected that single rectangle, which just shows the speaker. It doesn't show the column of other participants.
Okay, I'm gonna change what I have on my screen in terms of how much is shown. I want to see if you see any change in my screen.
Okay.
You see any change in my screen?
No.
Okay, great. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. If you're back, it would be great to see your faces so we know you're here.
Welcome, Nadine.
Hi, Nadine. You've got a half an hour, is that right, Nadine?
Oh, I don't need a half an hour. And
No. I mean, you are available for a half an hour.
5 minutes. Yes, I can stay with you guys for the hour. I mean, for half an hour. I'm teaching a class right now on. I have a little part-time gig where we teach court-ordered classes, so petty offenses. And this one today is on conflict management. So folks went to court and they were told take a class. That's what my little part-time gig is. A couple Saturdays a month.
Well, Nadine, if you can stay with us for the half an hour, we're going to do a few things before I ask you to talk about the upcoming.
I wish I could stay for 2 hours. Let's do this again.
Thanks. I think most people are back. What we're going to do in the next 15 minutes or so is to talk about some effective ways of letter writing and phone calling. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about the process of testifying. So Peter Du Bois is going to talk with us about some letter writing and phone calling skills. So Peter, take it away.
Thanks, Sue. Well, in this brief segment, we're going to get into one of the key nitty-gritty aspects of advocacy, and that is writing and or phoning legislators on particular bills that they're involved in that you support. You know, nothing I'm going to tell you now it is more than common sense that you already understand about communication strategies and situations. I just want to try and focus those commonalities, common sense points on what you would be doing in advocating for a particular piece of legislation. So if we can go to the next slide, Jim. This is something I cobbled together. There are all kinds of variations on this to describe a communication situation. Sometimes it's represented as a triangle with the message in the center and the writer, audience, and topics at the points. But essentially, when we think about advocacy of the kind we're talking about, it's a useful thing before you even put pen to paper or finger to keyboard to think about the context of what you're doing in advocating, what's really in play, and who are the players. I don't think you need a rhetoric degree to be attuned to what these elements are. If you look at the writer, and that could just as easily have said phone caller, there are any number of roles that you might have, and I've tried to list some of them. You're obviously or most likely a constituent of one district or another, whether House or Senate. It might be the district of the person you're communicating with, it might not be, but you're also a voter. I wouldn't come out and say that, because that might seem to be a little heavy-handed to say that you're a voter, and how you vote on this bill is going to influence me. You may or may not be a party member. You might be an independent. I don't know that that's necessarily relevant to say, but it's important for you to have that in the context of yourself and what values or position on a particular bill your party has overall. You're obviously a concerned citizen. You might be a Christian. You could be a member of any faith. You might be a member of any parish or synagogue or mosque, or you might not have a faith tradition. You also might be an impacted stakeholder, and by that I mean someone who is being affected by the problem or the social condition or the discriminatory environment that the bill is trying to address. All of those things are relevant, and you need to decide how much of who you are to include in your communication. You don't want to be writing a brief bio for the legislator. They're not going to have the time or the patience to wade through that, but a brief mention of the key identifiers of you is important to include in the communication. The audience is most likely, your intended audience at least, is a legislator, a senator or a member of the House, a representative. This person might be the sponsor of the bill. It might be moot to be writing to the sponsor of a bill. You know their position. They may or may not be a member of the committee that is hearing testimony about the bill. They're obviously a member of one of the two chambers. They may in fact be the representative of the district in which you live, in which case that's a point of confluence that's worth mentioning. The reality, however, is that in some cases, I don't know if it's many cases, that the legislator is not going to be the first person who reads your email or fields your call. They're going to be an aide or a staff member, and that person is screening what makes it through to the legislator. Now, I know the further, I don't want to say down so much, but the closer you get to municipal government, the greater the chances the actual legislator will see this communication. I don't know, and maybe Zoe can tell us later, how many senators and representatives have one or more staff members to screen communications. I don't know that, but that's something you need to keep in mind, and all the more reason to make your communication effective enough for that aide to pass it on to the legislator. Your purpose is to support a specific bill, again, in the context we're talking about. You want to influence the legislator. To that extent, you're a lobbyist. I might have put that role up in that group of things related to the writer. You are arguing for a bill, not on behalf of an organization you represent necessarily, although that's a possible context, but you're trying to influence that person to either let them know you support their endorsement of the bill, or if you think they might be opposing it, to change their mind. You can't presume to know their mind at this point, but that's what your goal is. And then the topic is kind of an umbrella for the purpose. It's the specific bill, but it's also either the social injustice or a flawed law or public municipal policy or a state policy, or a practice by some entity, landlords, for example. So it's useful, I think, to consider all of these elements. before you launch a communication to a legislator. I mean, obviously, we're living in a time when our messaging strategies and our information sources have been upended and made so much more chaotic with all the different information sources people have, the social media that is shaping attitudes and opinions. There's a lot of chaos out there. And frankly, the more we age, the more younger legislators we're going to have, people who have grown up with social media. We're still using a relatively antique communication strategy, email, but these elements are important for you to consider. If we could go to the next slide, Jim. Messaging and the call to action, and I know Sue has already mentioned this, and she's going to come back to that in some of her subsequent points for us. I think I should have added another bullet at the start, and that is the who, and that is the you, who you are. And the question is, in an email or a phone call, how much to say, how much to write. I think at the beginning of any standard communication, it's important to flesh out who you are, what of your different traits you want to share with this legislator that might be pertinent to them listening to you. And then the what is obviously the legislation and the condition in society or public policy that it's trying to remedy, and your point about why. Again, you can't be writing lengthy paragraphs. These have to be quick points. I'm not saying to condense them like these PowerPoint slides to phrases and sentence fragments as bullets, but you need to be pithy as long as you have their attention, because it's not going to last for very long. Go to the next slide, please. So, personal stories. Personal stories always have a value in these communications. They're specific, they'll get the attention of the legislator, but again, they can't be too lengthy. They can reference a real person, could be yourself, could be someone you know. It could be a place that's impacted, a category of place or a real particular place that the legislation is addressing. And it can be an experience. Now, I've put two bullets up there, real and imagined. If you yourself are directly impacted by the situation that the law is going to address, that's fantastic. And you can spend a little time fleshing that out in a sentence or two or three. But most of us are not going to have a direct personal experience with a pending bill of the kind we're talking about. We're concerned citizens. So my suggestion is that you try to include in your email or your phone call an imagined personal story, which might be introduced in such a way as Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so. You and I can imagine what it must be like for, Mary X to be living in a tent on the berm of a street corner and getting sick or feeling depressed and not necessarily being contacted by the agencies who are on the streets. And this bill is going to be funding an initiative too, et cetera, et cetera. So again, the idea is to, even if you don't have real specifics, put in an imagined specific as you can. And to that extent, boilerplate text. One of the things that Sue Torfin asked me to do last year on a couple of the pending bills that we were going to recommend people write about is to cobble together some boilerplate text that would be helpful for people to pull together a communication and then target it to the one or more legislators they're going to communicate with. And we're going to have some of the boilerplate beginnings of paragraphs in our resources on social justice following this workshop. But I'm going to read you the beginning of just a couple of sentences in the communication we pulled together for that bill on record sealing that Sue spoke about a little earlier. The first paragraph begins, as a concerned Colorado citizen and an active member of the Episcopal Church of the United States, I am asking you to support HB 21-1214, record sealing collateral consequences reduction. My congregation, St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, Denver, supports legislation and social, and then, you know, a little more text. The next paragraph begins, this bill would, among other provisions, create an automatic process for sealing arrest records under certain circumstances. Next paragraph, an important impact of this legislation would be to da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I end with a paragraph that works in some of these legislative situations. The General Convention of the Episcopal Church has long opposed barriers to full integration in community and society, et cetera. So we can search for statements for members of our congregation or Episcopalians where the National Episcopal Church has a relevant statement about a particular legislative area. And then it ends, thank you for your serious consideration and support. Let me just end by way of contrast, getting you to think about the situation of being a legislative advocate by reading you part of Psalm number 30, which was in today's Episcopal Lectionary of Readings. Now, think about the situation here. This is probably King David talking to God, as most of the Psalms do. And here's what he says. I cried to you, O Lord, what profit is there in my blood if I go down to the pit? Will my dust praise you or declare your faithfulness? You have turned my wailing into dancing. You have put off my sackcloth. Therefore, my heart sings to you without ceasing. O Lord, my God, I will give you thanks forever. Well, he's negotiating there. He's lobbying God. He figures that God would be moved if he thought about it, and if he let this person die, he would no longer be there to praise and sing his glory. That's a very different context from writing to a legislator. But I invite you to keep that in mind, to think about what's relevant for you when you write to support a particular bill. Thanks.
Peter, thank you so much. I want to reiterate that personal stories are important, and anytime you can address them directly, that would be great. But when we do ask you to take action on a bill, we will send you a sample letter. You can send it as is, or you can personalize it before you send it. Just so you know, you don't always have to be creating the content of that message. Jim, I'm going to ask you to take down that that slide, because we're going to change our order here for a few minutes. Nadine is here with us for another 15 minutes, and Jonathan just joined us. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you. Both of them are going to address us briefly about a bill that's coming up that we're hoping to support. Nadine, I'm going to ask you to go first, since you have to be leaving us shortly. If you can take about 5 minutes to talk to us about, I think it's called the Clean Slate Initiative. I think that's accurate. So tell us what that's about. And this is the one that's related to the record sealing bill that was passed last year. Nadine Kerstetter is also a new member of our social justice ministry, and she can tell us anything she'd like to about her role in the world that's got her involved in this bill.
All right, thank you, Sue. I was so pleased. Number one, the information, Sue, you sending so much information about legislation. I've never seen a church be so involved, and politics is what's necessary. It makes our world what it is. People go, oh, I don't want to be political, or I'm not listening. That's politics, and yeah, it's politics. It makes the world go round. We've got to embrace politics. Peter, I love what your PowerPoint and showing the steps to communicate with our legislators. So yeah, an email came across that asked if I would be interested in joining the Interfaith Alliance, and I jumped on that. So Melanie from Interfaith Alliance and others are the steering committee to pass another bill that expands on the 1214. So what's interesting about communicating is we're going to introduce this bill that is very much justice involved, folks. I mean, that's what it's about, is this justice involved individuals who are looking for housing and jobs and to have, a life that's only fair. They've done their time, did a crime, did the time, maybe it was dismissed, and all these other different things. But instead of presenting it as another justice bill, we're presenting it as economic development. And this bill is supported bipartisan. We have, who are the names of some of these folks I know? Tipper is actually, Carrie Tipper is my representative in my District 28, so I know her. But we have a Republican senator who is sponsoring the bill, Dennis Heisey. We have Senator Robert Rodriguez, who's a Democrat. Carrie Tipper is a Democrat. And then there's also Neville, who's a Republican. So it's bipartisan. But we can speak to those who we can speak bipartisan if we're looking at as economic development. And so I think that's a real good tactic. And so the folks this bill will expand the 1214 to do this automatic sealing process of all the folks, the millions of people who are impacted by some kind of a crime, misdemeanors mostly, are not aware that they can seal. Only 5% of eligible citizens will go to courts to petition that their record be sealed. Only 5%. So we want that number higher. And I would come at it, I'm looking at what Peter had put down in how to communicate, but I've had experience lobbying for my union, the state union. I'm an employer of the Colorado Department of Corrections. So I've been to the Capitol. I have tapped the shoulders of representatives to talk to them. I've testified for those things. So making it very, if I were to lobby, if I was to go into the Capitol, our beautiful, beautiful building, I would say, I am, I believe, and therefore you should. I am an adult educator and a job coach for people wrapped in the justice system. I believe that if we can take down the barriers to employment and housing, or the economy will benefit. Therefore, Mr. or Miss Representative, I encourage you to support this bill. We don't have a number for the bill until it's introduced in January 25th, I think. Stakeholders. I have a list of what we call fair chance employers. These are employers who do hire people who have backgrounds. They do believe in giving people a chance to show their skills and what they can contribute to society. So we are asking these fair chance employers to testify as well, to write letters, to show up to the Capitol, to put their name perhaps on. We can create a long letter and have signatures of employers listed below. That would be another way of communicating. So let me see, what else do I want you guys to know? But yes, the housing insecurity, man, that can be taken care of in quite a bit if we can get this bill passed. Now, law enforcement will always be able to see sealed convictions, but landlords and employers and colleges won't be able to see it. It's kind of nice to say, have you ever been charged for the crime? And people can actually say no when it's sealed. Any questions that you guys have for me? And that was kind of a big old blurb.
I'm gonna ask to limit questions. Unfortunately, you won't be here at the end during our question section. Does anyone have a quick and dirty question that Nadine could answer?
I do. Hi, Nadine.
Penny, I haven't seen you
Right.
years.
Few years. Yeah. My question is, can landlords and colleges and employers, they can actually ask the question if you've ever been convicted?
They can, and if it's been sealed, the answer is no.
Great.
The answer is no.
May
Wonderful.
I ask a quick question? I just want to make sure I understand what kind of things can be sealed.
Yeah, so there's misdemeanors. Okay, number one, things that if someone's been charged but not convicted, sealed. So a charge doesn't mean found guilty. Those are easy ones to get rid of. Things that are dismissed or deferred, or the person has satisfied the court's requirements. So we're looking at where's my little list of things that are, they're already, because of the work that's been done in the last couple of years, they're already eligible to be sealed, but it's not automatic, and it costs a lot of money to petition or maybe even to hire an attorney. But the things that would be the misdemeanors and low-level felonies. Drug charges would be one that could be sealed. Yeah.
Great. That was a really useful question. Thank you so much, Nadine. We'll have you involved the whole way through, and that really gives us a good groundwork for what we'll be working for. Thank you so much.
You guys are welcome. Take care. Do this again.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Jonathan Caldwell is here, and he also had to come late because of some other commitments, but Jonathan is going to be encouraging us to support a bill that has to do with mental health issues. It also has not been initiated yet, and doesn't have a formal title, I assume. But Jonathan, if you would tell us about this bill, and if you want to tell us about how you're involved in mental health issues. Jonathan is an attorney who works with a lot of clients around mental health issues, but he's much more than that. So take it away, Jonathan.
Okay, great. I just unmuted myself. And you know, Sue, I don't really have an internal clock. If you don't mind just letting me know when about 4 minutes has passed so I can just, you know, manage that, that'd be great. Thank you for inviting me to speak about this topic as well. I am passionate about social justice, and I do a lot of work toward those ends professionally as well as through volunteering. I am an attorney licensed in Colorado, and I represent, as Sue said, issues around people who have issues around serious mental illness. There is a lot of energy and effort and people involved with, for example, suicide prevention, other things like that. This is all mental health. I'm focused on mental health disorders, brain disorders. These are not illnesses. These are things we don't know their etiology, and they affect people's ability to function in life. And so our laws right now are set up to prevent death, right? If someone is imminently dangerous to themselves or others, or if they have become so gravely disabled, so disabled that they are now gravely disabled and their life is at risk. I am also a director on the Colorado Guardianship Association Board of Directors. I am the chairperson for the mental health subcommittee of the elder law section of the Colorado Bar Association. And I am a director at the state chapter of NAMI. NAMI stands for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. It's a national brand that began in the 60s, by families who were had nowhere to go to advocate for their individual who was locked, you know, in just a warehouse. And it's grown since then. It's the nation's largest grassroots advocacy group for mental illness, specifically mental health disorders is how we start talk about it now. And we are a state chapter. The state chapter provides advocacy and support for the local chapters. The local chapters like NAMI Denver, NAMI Boulder, or maybe NAMI Southeast, because a couple of counties and cities are too small there to be one chapter. They provide things like family to family, peer coaching, et cetera, a number of different programs that aim to be something of like a lay provider within the industry and people helping people. So I am a director, and I also, as the director, I also chair their public policy committee. And we've been expecting a bill to introduce on February 2nd, proposed by Mental Health Colorado in conjunction with the Office of Behavioral Health. And it will be sponsored by Representatives Judy Amabile from Boulder and Senator, I'm sorry, I can't remember her first name, McCluskey from, I believe, El Paso County, or maybe Pueblo County. I think it's Pueblo County. And so this is a controversial bill to begin with, and it has two Democratic sponsors, no Republican sponsors. So beyond the politics of it, there's also the bureaucracy of it, and it's expected to be controversial at that level too. But here's why I think it's important. Here's why I think this bill needs to pass. We haven't seen an update on a holistic level to provisions and laws around involuntary treatment for people whose serious mental illness prevents them from taking care of themselves, either because they have decompensated and don't recognize it, or when they're at their baseline, they still do not, there's a specific symptom called anosognosia. That is specifically a symptom that they do not recognize that they have a mental illness. They are oblivious to it. And so that right there is how they become such a vulnerable population, and why I'm so passionate about supporting ways not only to make sure that they maintain individual rights, which I'm about to say about this bill, but also how to help them recover. And I've certainly seen success stories where people are able to recover and develop some guidelines and structure for their life.
Jonathan, we're at about 4 minutes.
Okay, good. I've got 1 minute left to kind of tell you what's really central.
No.
And the problem with that, right, is that it's 113 pages before it's on the last time I've seen it. There's way too much for me to cover. But I can tell you this, there is a provision in the bill that will take a lot of the bureaucratic red tape out of the process of getting someone into mental health treatment when they are sitting in jail, completely decompensated, sometimes as severe as, feces on the walls, not eating a thing, not recognizing where they are, how they can help themselves. Right now, they just wait for the state to catch up. And this would allow them to get into a civil process to at least be medicated, so we can not let them sit there and suffer so deeply. There is lots of protections for individual rights in this bill that allow someone to recover by also providing really strong pressure for the providers to get in touch with a lay caregiver, whether that's a mom, a dad, a brother, a best friend, someone who they know, keep them connected to their community. Giving them other rights are very important as well that are in this bill. Some of it's a matter of making sure that they have notice that some of their rights are being taken away. Others are about their ability to make phone calls, to write emails, things like that. When we're appointing attorneys on these things is important as well, so that they can have legal representation, to make sure that there is a reasonable argument there to medicate them against their will and change their brain chemistry. There are also provisions that allow structure to support better services when someone leaves the hospital. Right now, when someone leaves the hospital, they're no longer at hospital level care. They don't need to be hospitalized, but they're not ready to go out into the world and engage with a therapist and get back into their job. There's this huge gap. And we just don't have any way right now to structured that would support wraparound services, step down programs, housing, maybe vocational or socialization needs. And so this would be extremely important to have someone carry along with them and provide them with better services that way. And it will support the community mental health centers in doing that work on behalf of the person instead of on behalf of their payors, which is largely Medicaid at this point, unless someone has really deep pockets and will pay out of pocket. Even then, that doesn't always even happen. They say often it's just a Medicaid population. So I'm going to call it there. I've probably gone over my time by a minute or two, but again, this bill is going to come out February 2nd. It's Representative Amabile's bill. I can update Sue on the bill number and the title. And if you guys do have questions, I would ask you to please write them down, email them to me. I will compile them. I will answer them. I will give them to Sue, and the ministry can address those there. Or if they're really in depth, buy me a cup of coffee and let's talk about it. Thank you.
Jonathan, could you put in the chat your email address?
I will, yeah.
Because I don't think we have that on our resource list.
And my computer was out of batteries this morning, so I will do that on my phone when I figure out how.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. While we're talking about potential bills coming up, I want to just briefly address some others that we know are coming. They're not very concrete yet. There's a bill called the Jail Standards Commission, which is a criminal justice bill that will hold accountable the various jails and prisons that range around the state. One of the reasons we're focusing on some criminal justice bills is that the criminal justice system impacts people of color and people of lower income far more than other populations, and we want to adjust the equity there. Another criminal justice bill is called Deceptive Tactics in Juvenile Interrogation, and it prohibits using deception and false facts or beliefs to obtain a statement or admission from a juvenile. Otherwise, if there is deception used, it will be presumed inadmissible. Also, part of the bill is that all juvenile interrogations must be recorded. This implies to me that the opposite is happening at times, which seems appalling to me, and something that we would probably like to help change. I also know from something the governor said that there are going to be some affordable housing initiatives coming up. There's some $500 million catalyst that is being put toward affordable housing. I'm sorry, I can't tell you where that's coming from, but decisions need to be made about how that's used. And I also know that there's some bills coming up about mandatory minimum sentences that we'll be looking at. So lots of stuff coming up. The Social Justice Committee will try to be judicious in deciding which and how many of these we tackle. We don't want to overwhelm people, but we'll keep you informed on that distribution list where we're headed. We have one more topic before we stop for some questions, and that has to do with testifying. I know that when I first went to some of the training sessions with the Interfaith Alliance and they talked about testifying, I thought, well, that's not going to be me. I couldn't imagine that I would be willing to testify, and I have now testified 3 times and want to tell you that it's really not that difficult, and it feels really good when you think that maybe you can make a difference to something that is going to affect many, many people. As Peter mentioned, and as I've mentioned already, there's a tremendous impact of personal stories. I was at a committee hearing, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the topic, but half of the committee members were in tears because of the stories that people were telling in their testimony. That has to have a tremendous impact on how committee members vote on these bills. Some of us would probably say, well, I don't often have a personal story to share about the bill or the issue that's being discussed. I don't know anybody involved in that situation. But the fact is that we all have a faith story. We all have a story about how our faith supports our support of a bill or opposition to a bill. That's something that hasn't been mentioned. We might oppose a bill too. But we all have a faith story. The Interfaith Alliance is very clear that they want people to testify from a faith perspective. Part of that is to counteract the circumstances in which sometimes very right-wing, right religious groups rally themselves to testify on a bill that we might support from our progressive Christian view. And they really want, the Interfaith Alliance really wants us to step forward and say, no, there's a religious perspective that's different than that. And we want you to hear it. I remember one time there was a bill where there were 5 overflow rooms of people who wanted to testify, partly because the religious right rallied all these people and busloads of people came to testify against a bill that we would have supported. So sometimes it's really, really critical that the progressive religious view is spoken about. I want to thank several people from the congregation have testified. Marjan Clausen testified last year. Rhett David, what's Rhett David's last name? I'm so sorry.
North.
Say that again.
North.
Thank you. I lost it there for a minute. Was willing to testify in a bill. Something happened technically. It was remote and something happened technically, so he didn't get to testify. But I want to thank Bobby Kite, who's here today, who has already told me that she would be willing to speak up on some issues. But I want to let you all know that the process is not that intimidating. What happens is that the last year or two, it's been remote. Prior to that, it's been in person, and I've done it both ways. If it's in person, someone can walk into the room, sign a paper at the back of the list with your name and whether you support or oppose, and you will be called to say what you have to say. They usually call people on a panel of 3 or 4 people if they're testifying from the same perspective. For instance, there were 3 or 4 psychologists who addressed one of the bills that I was there for. And those are the people who get lots of questions from the committee. You know, they're the professionals speaking up for something. If it's remote, there is a form that you have to fill out in advance. And the remote WebEx stuff is something that I would walk you through. Each person is allowed 2 or 3 minutes to testify, and there is a timer in front of you, whether you're on screen or sitting at the desk in the front. They call you by name, you come and sit up at one of these places, and there's a little clock there that'll tell you whether your time is running out. So you do want to time yourself in advance. And you can just sit there and read your testimony. It doesn't have to be from memory. It can be in front of you. Another way to testify is that you can send in a written testimony in advance of the hearing, or you can write something and have somebody else read it for you. All of that's possible, and I would be happy to coach you through any of that. The Interfaith Alliance is happy to coach anybody. If we're working in collaboration with them and we have somebody who wants to testify, they will assign us to a panel of 3 or 4 people. And when your name is called, you speak up. The Interfaith Alliance, I think, is planning to have regular every 2 weeks or so coaching sessions for people who want to testify. So if someone thought they might be inclined to do that and would want some help in honing their message, there would be help for doing that. I am going to take 2 minutes to read to you the testimony I gave last year so you get a sense of the kinds of things to include and kind of the etiquette of testifying. Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sue Torfin, and I'm here as a representative of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church and on behalf of the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado. I'm testifying today in support of HB 21-1214, the Record Sealing Collateral Consequences Reduction Bill. As a religious community, we believe in fostering a full and productive life for all citizens without scapegoating, inequality, or discrimination toward any segments of the population. All people deserve dignity and basic human rights. Our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color compared to white people. Thus, any collateral damage that results for a person with any kind of criminal or arrest record will more greatly impact in a negative way minority populations. For anyone with a criminal record, there are significant barriers to acquiring housing and employment, resulting in economic insecurity for not only individuals, but their families, including the 60,000 children in Colorado who have had a parent incarcerated. Reducing obstacles to housing and jobs has been shown to lower the recidivism rate of the formerly incarcerated. It has also been shown that offenders who do not reoffend within 3 years of their previous conviction are unlikely to reoffend. Thus, sealing their records does not negatively affect public safety. For people who have been convicted of a crime and have served their sentence, having the option to seal their record increases the prospects for a productive return to society. Because in this country, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty, it is even more reasonable to seal the records of those who have been arrested but have had no charges filed against them, some of whom are merely too poor to pay exorbitant fines they cannot get out from under. It should no longer be acceptable in the state of Colorado for minority populations to be at greater risk of arrest and more severe sentences, nor for the state to continue to stigmatize and punish people who've been arrested, charged or not, by retaining records that prevent a successful re-engagement of society. Though this bill does not allow for the sealing of all felony records, it does include some automatic sealing of records for arrests that never resulted in charges being filed, as well as for certain drug offenses. It provides a process and some financial help for others to request the sealing of their records, and a process to receive guarantees that the record sealing has been completed. My religious tradition calls for true justice, which includes fairness for all, but also includes the opportunity for redemption from mistakes. We offer grace and forgiveness and a hand up for those in trouble. We seek a renewal of our society that leads to opportunities for all to live with dignity and a fair chance for health and prosperity. I strongly encourage you to support this bill as a step toward these goals. Thank you for your time. There's a lot of details in there about the bill. And if you were to testify on any bill, we would want to make sure that you have those significant bits of information, but it's also your own personal story and personal conviction that should make a difference. So that is the conclusion of all our planned comments. I want to leave some time for questions, but I would also like you, Jim, you can take that slide down now. At this time, I would like you to use the chat if you care to if you are interested in participating in any of the things that we're doing, and there is a slide, Jim, it's probably the second last slide, the kinds of things that you might want to get involved in. If you want to put something in the chat letting us know that, you could put it in there for everyone, or you could put it in there for me or Sue Kilgore. If you look at your chat at the bottom of the screen and you click on chat, a chat screen will come up. And at the bottom, it'll say to everyone. If you click on that little arrow, you can send the message to some one person in particular if you'd like. So here's also, this isn't the slide I was looking for, Jim. It's the one that says distribution list, rapid response list. There we go. So just to reiterate, if you would like to be on that email distribution list that gets all the messages that I send out, if you would like to be on the rapid response text list, that's for people who want to make themselves available at the last minute to take action if they have the time to do that. If you think you might be interested in testifying on something, please let me know that. And of course, as you get messages from me through the legislative session, if there's something that you think you have the ability to speak to personally, I would encourage you to let me know that. And then if there you want to indicate any areas of special interest that you might have some particular experience or passion about. For instance, if you think you might have some particular interest in the mental health issues that Jonathan's bill addresses, or any of the LGBTQ issues, please indicate that if you could also. And that chat will be saved, so we will have all that information. If you'd rather contact us directly, now Jim, that slide with our contact information. There. And of course, all of us are in the parish directory if you want to look for it that way. But let's leave that slide up for a minute. And I would like to open this up for questions. I'm trying to think what would be the easiest way to do that. If you look at the bottom of your screen and click on the icon that says reactions, there should be a bar there that says raise hand. If you click on that, a little raised hand will come up on your personal screen, so we can see that you have something you'd like to say. If that doesn't work for you and you just want to chime in on a topic, that's fine too. So let's go to not screen sharing and go to gallery view so we can see everybody. And I'd like to ask if any of you have any questions about anything that's been said. I know that was a whole lot of information. Probably some of it all new for some of you and not for all of you. So does anyone have any questions or input that they'd like to give on our process? Zoe, go ahead.
I think Peter had his hand up before I did.
Oh, Peter, I didn't see it.
Go ahead, Zoe. I'll go after you.
So I was just gonna, two things I wanted to offer. First of all, a thank you, and thank you for including me. You may or may not already know the bill that Jonathan was talking about. I'm pretty sure is House Bill 1065, if you want to track it.
It is not. In fact, that's a bill that Jonathan would not support.
Okay.
I was confused by that too until I talked to him yesterday. So yeah, his bill has not been introduced yet.
Okay. I couldn't find the bill that Nadine is talking about either, that expands.
It's not submitted yet.
Okay.
I think she said it was going to be January 25th.
Okay. So anyway, the only other thing I was going to say is I am, I believe, and therefore you should. I really like that, except I have a bias against I believe because people believe lots of different things, but particularly because of the structure of I am and what you're going to ask, I think you can say I am, and based on my experiences, I have seen that, or my experience confirms that, and therefore.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you. This is all wonderful. And if there are any, if anybody has any questions about how the process works or why the process works, I'm happy to answer those, but otherwise I'll shut up.
Okay, thanks, Zoe. Peter.
So you mentioned something in passing that triggered a two-part question. You said something about that we might not support a particular bill. The difference between not supporting and opposing is a big action difference. And I'm wondering, in your tenure guiding our advocacy initiative in social justice, have we ever opposed a particular bill? And even if we haven't, do you think on our resources page for advocacy, we might want to get some boilerplate language in place that could frame an opposing argument?
Yeah, those are great questions. Last year was the first year that we collectively did this structure to work on legislation, and all the bills we chose to work on, we were in favor. The Interfaith Alliance has a bill tracking page. I apologize, if you go to their website right now, it is a mess. I don't know what's wrong with it. I think they're without an administrative assistant or something. It's a mess right now, but they will have a bill tracking page, and they indicate very clearly the bills that they are working to support and working to oppose. We have not chosen bills to oppose yet, but it's possible that we could. And yes, I think it would be great to have some boilerplate opposition.
Would that fold into the rapid response
yes.
process if time were an issue? I would also point out that the Interfaith Alliance website, which is on the resources page of the slides, they have somewhere on their site a resource I think is very well conceived. It's called an advocacy toolkit. And it's got a lot of nitty gritty about the process and advice and whatnot. Sue Torfin, you're probably familiar with that, but I have found that a real use. You can download it as a PDF.
Great, thank you so much. Lynn.
Okay, this is not any of the topics that we've talked about, but it's something I think that a lot of people might be interested in and concerned about. And it's an example of something that I opposed. It passed the Colorado legislature. I don't have the data on the bill or even when, but it made it illegal for people to oppose boycott, divestment, and sanction against programs from the West Bank that took property and knocked down houses and stuff like that for Palestinians. And I think that's unconstitutional. We did it with South Africa and it was perfectly legal, but there have been a number of states that have opposed it, and my own college, Barnard College, which I adore, made it very difficult to have any conversation about it on campus. So it's a big issue, and it's very disturbing to me.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, would it be possible to put up the resources slide again? It was on for such a short time, I couldn't do a
Absolutely,
screen.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Jim, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
You'd like to see the resources
Yeah,
slide.
I got it. Thanks.
Oh, that's contacts. There. Thank you.
And we'll be putting all the slides, including this one, on the advocacy webpage in social justice in PDF form, again, so that you can download it. I mean, we had to be really, I don't know, restrained here. There are so many resources we could have put on this, and we may in fact put in a few more and have a second page. But for now, that's what we have.
Well, thank you very much. Apologies aren't necessary given the breadth and depth of what's been going on here. Thanks.
Anybody else have a comment, question, suggestion?
Well, I'll just say how grateful I am to you all that you have put together such a useful program and put so much work, and it's just beautifully done. I'm proud of being a member of this church.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Selena.
That was similar. This has been a very informative for me. So I very much appreciate, this is back to the sort of education part, but I very much appreciate that. And I am very much impressed with the work that has been done so far by the Social Justice Ministry. So
thank you so much. One of the things we worry about when we do these, because it's not the first time we've done what you call an advocacy training session, is that people start assuming that they've already done it and they know what we've done in the past. I think this was a step beyond that. I think we were more in depth than we have in the past. So if you hear people say things like that, yeah, I've gone to those before, you could encourage them that they're, we're getting more detailed and more organized about how we're doing things. Alex, did you have another comment, or did you just leave your hand up? Okay.
I forgot to take my hand down, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions about what would be expected or what is entailed by anything that you might offer to get involved in? I'm really delighted to see some new faces here today. Really delighted that you're here. All right. I want to thank the Social Justice Ministry. Like I said earlier, you can tell that we have a lot of enthusiasm and we have a lot of stuff going on right now, but this is a wonderful team to work with. It's really a privilege. It's really a privilege. So thanks everybody. Thank you all for being here. You'll be hearing from us